Africa Center, doing our field work in Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and other places. Let you know that this event today is being recorded live and going out over our streaming internet. So act accordingly. We do welcome you all here. The Wilson Center, as you probably know, was established in 1968 as by Congress as the living memorial to President Woodrow Wilson. Not to be confused with the Wilson Center at Princeton University, which is a very different organization, although named after the same president. Wilson was, of course, the only president with a PhD, a true academic, and he always was very concerned about the intersection of policymakers and the academic expert community, trying to get more interaction and more cross-fertilization between those communities. And so this center was established with that as its objective, to try to bring the worlds of policy and the worlds of academia together to lend more light to issues and to help the policymakers in formulating their policy towards certain issues and regions of the world. We are very happy today to be presenting a program on Somalia. This is just going to be a briefing on the current situation. We have to work with us here today Ambassador John Yates. Some of you I know John very well, a colleague of mine from years back when I was in the Foreign Service, and John is a career Foreign Service officer with several decades of service on the continent, including, as you've seen probably from the notes, he's been ambassador in Zaire, Cape Verde, Chargé d'Affaires in Zaire, ambassador in Cape Verde, Benin, Equatorial Guinea, and Cameroon, and is currently now our special envoy for Somalia. He's been very involved in Somalia issues for a number of years, having been with the Somalia unit based in the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya, and the observer to the Somalia National Reconciliation Conference that took place in Mgathi, Kenya, where they established the transitional federal charter and the federal institutions. Ambassador Yates is going to speak to us for about 10 minutes. And then, per the Woodrow Wilson tradition, we will open it to questions and answers. I will remind you again at that time, but I ask you to keep your questions short and make them questions, not statements. I know sometimes Somalia is an emotive issue, and we will proceed under those rules. So I turn it over to John Yates. Thank you very much.
Do I have to do anything?
It should be on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here today and thank the Woodrow Wilson for inviting me to speak. Actually, most of the speaking is probably going to be done by you, because originally I was invited to participate in a Horn of Africa seminar with our ambassadors from Nairobi, Addis Ababa, and Djibouti. So the four of us were going to be here the same amount of time. So I'm feeling a little naked up here all alone for reasons having to do with the African Chiefs of Mission Conference. They're unable to complete or to come over today. So you get me, and so the emphasis will be Somalia, not any of those other countries that you might have come to hear about. And what I'd like to do first is to review our goals for Somalia and the nature of our efforts there so far. And then, of course, as I said, most of the program will be your questions. I've been in Nairobi this time since January of 2007, and I was appointed by Secretary Rice as Special Envoy for Somalia in May of this year. I lead a team at our embassy in Nairobi, but dedicated entirely to Somalia. Of course, there are countless other actors, both in Washington and various other overseas posts, concentrating on our efforts towards Somalia. And some of them are here today in the audience, including the State Department Somali Desk Officer Noel Gary, who's been working the issue for a number of years, and one of our close partners in collaborators based in Nairobi, Eric LaRoche, the resident representatives for the United Nations Development Program, and some members of his staff. There are others too. I see my colleague David Shin, who's been working in Somalia much longer than I have. And I know there are many people in this room that have been involved in the Horn for a long time. But I just wanted to mention Noel and Eric, upon whom I might ask for assistance if your questions get too tough. The United States continues to engage with the leadership of the transitional federal government and Somali stakeholders across the political spectrum to achieve U.S. foreign policy objectives in Somalia, which are eliminate the terrorist threat, promote political stability, and support the establishment of a functioning central government, and to try to address the humanitarian needs of the Somali people. Our priority initiatives in Somalia to remain focused on these priorities are three priorities designed to restore governance and long-term stability. First, encourage a political dialogue between the transitional federal institutions and other key Somali stakeholders with the goal of resuming the transitional process outlined by the Transitional Federal Charter leading to national elections in 2009. Second, to achieve full deployment of an African Stabilization Force known as the African Union Mission in Somalia, or AMISOM. And third, to mobilize international assistance to help build the mid-level governance capacity of the transitional federal institutions and support the continuation of the transitional political process as outlined by the Transitional Federal Charter. Clearly, all three elements are intertwined. Neither the humanitarian crisis nor the extremist elements will go away without a stable government. Likewise, the government is likely to become stronger without a political process that isolates extremist elements in Somalia. The United States remains actively engaged in a range of bilateral, regional, and multilateral efforts to encourage positive developments and further political progress inside Somalia. On a bilateral basis, the United States continued to interact with TFG representatives and Somali stakeholders to achieve these policy goals through the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya, which maintains overall responsibility for engagement in Somalia. Officers in the Somalia unit at Embassy Nairobi meet and communicate regularly with President Abdullah Yusuf, Prime Minister Ali Mohammed Ghedi, Speaker of the Parliament Sheikh Adam Mohammed Nur Madobe, and other members of the government and parliament, as well as key segments of the Somali society. We also continue to meet and discuss Somalia with regional leaders on a regular basis. The U.S. embassies in Djibouti and Ethiopia regularly call on host nation counterparts to review developments in Somalia. The U.S. mission to the African Union is actively engaged with the AU leadership on its plans in Somalia. And of course, our embassy in Kampala is a point for consultation with Ugandan authorities on support of the one Amazon contingent so far deployed in Somalia. That list is by no means exclusive, of course. Embassy Asmara monitors events there, and periodically U.S. authorities farther afield, such as in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Doha, and other countries also are involved on a less regular basis. Our ultimate goal is to see Somalia through to free and fair elections in 2009. These elections would signify the successful achievement of the goals of the transitional process that started in 2004. The most recent milestone on this road to elections was the National Reconciliation Conference, which took place between July and August of this year. The primary objective of the NRC was to achieve equitable representation in the transitional federal institutions and to agree on a roadmap for the remainder of the transitional process. Unfortunately, due to the lack of participation from key opposition figures, despite repeated invitations from the Congress managers and encouragement from the international community, the Congress has not fully achieved these objectives. Nonetheless, there were some positive outcomes from the NRC, and we have encouraged the TFG to continue to reach out to key stakeholders and to implement the conclusions of the Congress in good faith and in keeping with the continued process of dialogue and reconciliation. Just for example, in moving forward with the transitional process, all transitional committees appointed by the transitional federal government must be fully inclusive of all key stakeholders, including those who may not have participated in the Congress. We are again calling on all players in the transitional process to join and participate in a nonviolent political process that will ensure a successful roadmap to 2009. More immediately, we must have a ceasefire among all armed groups in Somalia to establish a framework for a longer-term security sector reform and to isolate extremist elements that are able to exploit the current environment. The level of violence must be reduced, if not for the sake of the political process, then for the sake of innocent civilians who continue to suffer injury and death at the hands of extremist elements who continue to resort to armed conflict in pursuit of their individual agendas. The humanitarian situation in Somalia is a grave one. USAID is spearheading our aid efforts, and we're working closely with the United Nations and the international community to optimize those efforts. We have provided approximately $24.5 million to date in fiscal year 2008, which only began on October 1st, so you can calculate the figures. That's more than $1 million a day. I'm not suggesting that that rate of humanitarian assistance will continue throughout the year, but you can see that it's a massive problem. But this humanitarian assistance from us and from the UN and international agencies and NGOs provides life and livelihood saving assistance to internally displaced persons, host communities, agrarian and pastoralist populations in all regions of South Central Somalia. Between FY 2007 and FY 2008, we have also provided approximately $59 million in food aid to vulnerable Somalis through the distribution in networks of CARE and the UN World Food Programme. We will continue to monitor the situation and coordinate with the donor community to ensure an effective response to Somalia's dire humanitarian needs. Although this is just a vignette, I'd like to share with you a recent example of our engagement with key figures in Somali society. I hosted an iftar dinner in Nairobi on September 30, and nearly 80 Somalis accepted the invitation. We had several notes afterwards from guests who said that many of the people in the tent seated at the tables were people who would not ordinarily share a meal together and talk about issues. In fact, some of the younger participants stood up and publicly told their elders of their own concerns and hopes and their views of what was needed from the parents' generation to make progress in achieving their hopes and aspirations. We also take some hope from events like this, but by the same token, we were struck when a speaker at the iftar declared that Somalis want to hurt no one, to which the crowd replied in sync, except for ourselves. It struck me that a key factor in Somalia's political future would be in translating this self-awareness into a willingness to work together in pursuit of common objectives and towards reconciliation in the near future. It is important for the Somali people to focus on the future, moving forward in the transitional political process as envisioned by the Charter, rather than focusing on the current composition of the TFG and the institutions. Like in Liberia or the Democratic Republic of Congo, the transitional federal institutions are not permanent institutions. They are a transitional mechanism that provides a framework for achieving the objectives outlined in the Charter and the formation of representative governance institutions following the transitional process. We understand, of course, that this is an ongoing process and that we have not reached anywhere near the end. Along with our regional and international partners, the United States will remain engaged in supporting this much-needed process of inclusive dialogue, however long it may last, while also responding to the humanitarian needs of the Somali people. And with that, I will close and be happy to take questions, or at least be prepared to take questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. It's a brief but a very succinct statement of where we're at right now. Okay, we will take questions now. We will ask you to identify yourself when you raise your hand. I will, as is sort of our practice here, take 2 or 3 questions in a row, depending upon our complicity. And we will have microphones at the back, so wait for the microphone to arrive so that your voice can be heard on the telecast. And then let's open it up to questions. Let me see some hands. Okay, we've got one at the back there.
Yes.
Microphone.
My name is Aaron. Thank you, Mr. Yates, and thank you, Mr. Steve McDowell. I'm Somali and I was born and raised in Mogadishu, and I would like to know, as you followed up yesterday, was arrested the guy who was in charge for the World Food Program, and the government is made of warlords, and the guy who's in charge for the police department, the chief of the police department in Somalia, his name is Aidid. That's the guy who shut down the Black Hawk Down. And I was wondering, you supported him, and he gets paid by the U.S. money. How do you feel when the guy who cleaned up the city for 6 months without any problem in Somalia, the ICU, they become criminals, and the warlords are promoted? And also, my uncle was in war in 1977 with Ethiopia, and he died. And his son, I was sending him money until he was killed by the Ethiopian troops. Is Ethiopia will be the problem solver of Somalia? I believe it's not. And also, China cannot can run for the U.S. White House. That's the same thing I believe. Ethiopia should be out of Somalia. That is the solution.
Okay, this is becoming a statement quickly and not a question. We heard your first question.
Cannot solve the problem of Somalia if you want to solve it, Mr. Yates. And I appreciate you working very, very hard. You have to understand the problem in Somalia.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Larry Friedman here in the front.
Thank you. Lawrence Freeman from Executive Intelligence Review. Ken Menkhaus, a little while earlier, I guess a couple months ago, said that the situation in Somalia was the worst he's seen since the 93-94 period. And this follows, of course, the invasion by Ethiopia, which the gentleman referred to, which was supported by the U.S. So how is the situation improving if the United States continues to support the TFG in the way it has in the collusion with the Ethiopians? It seems to me it's getting worse, not better. There has to be a reversal in axiomatic ideas about how it's going to be changed. We can't just continue what we're doing. And has the situation actually gotten worse after the invasion the first 10 months of this year?
I think those two questions are full of a lot of material for John. Let's stop with those and see what we've got.
Okay. Well, those are observations and questions that are obviously very crucial. And the security situation in Somalia, as I tried to indicate in my brief remarks, is quite poor. On the question of the government of warlords, as our first questioner noted, what I would really answer to him is that the government, the transitional federal government, was the government that was developed after the Mkati and Eldoret process in Kenya in 2004, based upon almost 2 years of negotiations of a charter by several hundred Somalis. It's true that one can always question when you get 200 or 400 Somalis together what the representational balance is. But what they came up with was a formula that was used to choose the current government. It includes some warlords, including Abdullah Yusuf was most of its history is a warlord. On the other hand, it's the only government that has been chosen according to the charter. It's the government we have to work with. It's a government with limited capacity. It's a government that we've been trying to help improve its capacity. And all we can do is hope that not all we can do, but we do hope that we are able to help it perform better and to get, as I said, this is a transitional government. We have about 2 years, a little bit over 2 years to go in the transition. And we hope that we are able to, that this government or this government can help us get to that point. On the question of Ethiopia, it's true. This is a controversial issue for most Somalis, but I can tell you that I have talked to hundreds, maybe not even thousands of Somalis, and although most decry the presence of Ethiopian troops continuing in Somalia, most also say to me and to others that they don't want the Ethiopians to leave until there's something to fill that vacuum. Now, there is the group that recently met in Asmara, and that is their sole issue, of course, is for Ethiopia to withdraw. But most Somalis that I've spoken with, both within and outside in the near diaspora, I haven't spoken to people in Minnesota and in Ohio, but in Dubai, in Djibouti, and other places in the region, almost unanimously, they do not want the Ethiopians to do not think that the Ethiopians could safely leave now and create a vacuum which would be further exploited by other elements. Now, it is our policy, it is the policy of Ethiopia to help facilitate a departure. And one of the ways that we've been trying to help facilitate the conditions for an Ethiopian departure is by supporting the deployment of AMISOM troops. Unfortunately, up until October 18th, the only African country that has responded with troops has been Uganda. I can tell you that also from people who have been in Mogadishu and from, again, speaking with Somalis, that the Ugandan troops have gotten very high marks for their efforts, but at 1,600 they're not enough. They're not anywhere. They're one-fifth of the 8,000 that the African Union and the IFGAD had recommended as an initial complement. So that is a real problem. We hope that by end of this month or November we will have also two battalions of Burundians. There are other African countries such as Ghana and Nigeria and elsewhere who have pledged troops, but for either domestic or international or financial reasons have not been able to deploy. So this is a real problem, and it's a problem for us. And as I say, the security problem, especially in Mogadishu, is not good. And a lot of people look back to the 6 months of the Islamic courts, and when Mogadishu was, in fact, relatively much more peaceful. That didn't hold for the whole country, and when the courts tried to expand to other areas, that was when the Ethiopian invasion was triggered at the request of the transitional federal government. There are probably some other points that need to be made on this. Let me just say that Ken Menkhaus is one of the preeminent authorities on Somalia, and I listen to him, as obviously do you and others in this room. And Ken has been into Somalia a couple times this year since I've been here. He was there when I was there in 2004, and I have the greatest respect for his observations. And this has been a very tough year in Mogadishu, especially.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's take a couple more questions. Let's get the one down front here. Alicia, down here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Abdul Nur. I do agree the Somalis want Ethiopia to stay there until we have a stable government. The only Somalis who doesn't want the Ethiopians is a small group who simply was benefit out of the chaos of 17 years that we had also in our country, direct or indirect. Or a small group that also have been brainwashed by the Islamicists who thinks no one is right except them. But my question is, the Ethiopian troop is already withdrawing from Somalia, majority of them. And the international community also promised they're going to help the African Union troops to come to Somalia by help them logistically and also all the resources that they need. Where the United States stand on that, and what's been taken by supporting the African Union troops to come to Somalia, and if they're coming, when are they coming?
My name is Dayib Sheikh. I'm with the March Group. I was wondering if you can make comment or what's happening lately in Somalia. We've been hearing for Prime Minister went to Ethiopia yesterday, and we know what's happening as a Somalis American. If you're going to just speak out and to say what's happening lately now, really appreciate it.
I'm sorry, the last part you said?
Yeah, we just wanted to know what's going on with the Prime Minister and the President.
Is anybody here from the Ethiopian embassy?
My name is Omar Abukar,
Yeah.
and my question is directed to the Mr. Ambassador. First of all, certainly Somalis don't believe what Abdul Nur had said. Ethiopians have been part of the problem, and they can never be part of the solution. And you knew, Mr. Ambassador, that when the parliament, they debated the first time whether Ethiopian troops should come in or not, overwhelmingly the parliament rejected the first time. And they fought physically, as you remember in the world news. But the parliament was willing to have troops from the Arab countries, Africans, any other nations except the neighboring countries. It's ironic to have Ethiopian in Somalia. It's like Hamas being in Tel Aviv. That's seriously. If people want, I do not understand how any decent human being could approve such a destruction, shelling in the city.
Okay, let's bring this to a question,
To
please.
the question, sir, first of all, how do you define a government? This government is destroying us, and you're telling us it's a government. For the last 3 years, could you tell me any functional minister in Mogadishu or anywhere as a government? Secondly, my dear, how would you treat the group in Eritrea? Do you outlaw them? Do you give them the rubber stamp of terrorism? Or they are part of the solution? What's your stand? Second, the third question, my dear, that I am very, very, really, the weapons that was used in Mogadishu, that was tested, white phosphorus, the Ethiopian troop used, shelling the civilians. And the number is underestimated. It's not 400,000 who displaced, it's 1/3 of that. Actually, more than a million was displaced. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's a lot. We will stop there with the questions. John, you got a lot to tackle there.
All right, yes, I do. Well, let me go, first of all, what's going on in Baidoa and Addis today. I have to tell you that I left Nairobi night before last and got here yesterday evening, and so there may be events that I missed. I know you all know, at least all of you who've been following Somalia with any degree of detail, that right now in Baidoa there is a introduction of a no confidence vote, a no confidence resolution in the government of Ali Gedi. Because after 2.5 years, there are certain steps. This is the president. This is coming from the supporters of the President Yusuf's side. After 2.5 years, there were certain steps that were supposed to have been accomplished by the transitional federal government, which haven't been, and the president's people, let's say, have introduced a motion, about, a no confidence motion. On the other side, there's another issue that has been introduced by the supporters of Ali Gedi, which is that since the situation in Somalia has been so bad for most of those 2.5 years, and they haven't had a place to operate. They didn't have a place to operate until they moved into Baidoa about a year ago. That therefore the 2.5 year clock shouldn't have started ticking. There are other issues, of course, too, but this is the constitutional issue as to whether or not the government of Ali Gedi will survive. There are many people in his community and many people in the region who would point to some people here have, our last speaker, for example, have pointed out the non-performance or not very good performance of the government. And I have to say that again, in traveling around the region and speaking with Somalis, both mostly the Somalis of a certain class, but they don't like the TFG. They don't like what's going on. But the primary issue, and they don't even support or don't want to they want to support, but are afraid to support the transition because they don't believe that the transitional federal government can deliver on their pledges. And so one of the main things that's been said to me is, we don't like what's going on, but we know that there's a short time. We know that we can get someplace in 2009, but we need a government that can perform. And this is really the basis of the issue of what's going on, or one of the bases of the issues that's going on in Baidoa today. I did hear after I left Nairobi that yesterday the Prime Minister did go to Addis. I know that the Ethiopians have been concerned about the performance of the government as well. I know that amongst the Hawaiian community, at least the Prime Minister's community, there are many people who have been asking him to try to find a way to leave gracefully. There are others, of course, who say that it'll be an insult to the community, or worse, if he leaves. But in any case, he's in Addis today. The Ethiopians who have been identified by many people as having been the godfather of the TFG, both having had some part in facilitating the conditions that resulted in the selection of President Yusuf and of Getty, have been very close with the government on all these. I do not know if Ali Getty will go back to Baidoa and continue the fight. I do not know if Ali Getty has the votes to maintain himself in power as Prime Minister in his government. I do know that 22 members of his government have also asked for him to resign. But things in Somalia are never quite exactly as they seem, and so it's really very hard to tell what the vote would be. I think many observers, maybe a majority of them, think that he wouldn't survive a no confidence vote. But I can't say that because there's a lot of, as they say, electioneering going on in Baidoa. With regard to the question about support for African Union troops, as I mentioned in one of my earlier remarks, it's been the response of the African countries to coming to Somalia, and the response of the international community in supporting them, helping them get there, has been not famous. We, the United States, fully supported, or almost fully supported, the deployment of the Ugandan troops. We're also taking a very big role in supporting the arrival of the Burundian troops, as I said, we hope by the end of the month. But there are African Union says they're lacking money for some of the other troops. The Nigerians have, because of their own shall we say, crises after the election, have been reluctant to send the 2 battalions that they promised, although they keep saying they will eventually. I know that the Ghanaians also say that they're ready to come, but they haven't quite made it that one. But I can really mostly speak for the United States, and we have, I think the figure is something over $40 million that we've used to support Amazon to this day. Somebody asked about what is the role of the people who held the counter Congress in Asmara, Congress that was made up primarily of ex-members of the Islamic courts and dissident parliamentarians from the transitional federal government or transitional federal parliament, and some members of the diaspora and others. But the main parts, if anybody's looked at the executive committee that came out of that conference, is primarily the courts and the ex parliamentarians. As I said before, that Congress turned out to be largely a one one-issue Congress, which was, you can tell by the name, the liberation of liberation is in the Congress name, and they're talking about the liberation of Somalia from Ethiopian troops. There are members of the Congress, both from the courts and certainly from the ex-parliamentarians, that we would very much like to see rejoin the process in Mogadishu. We and other international partners have made strong efforts to encourage their return, as have the Somali leadership. There are members also, I should say, frankly, there are members of the courts who are on the international terrorist list who wouldn't be welcome to return, but we would very much like to have the opposition, wherever they are, to return and join the process. There was another question, I'm sure. Someone mentioned about the Ethiopian behavior in Mogadishu, and certainly the situation in Mogadishu has been a very difficult security situation. I could have brought you, however, one or two of the recent collections of Somali press articles, international press articles, or international open source articles on Somalia, and I could tell you that at least 2/3 of those articles come from jihadist websites taking credit and pleasure in the killing of Ethiopian troops, of assassinations of individual politicians or TFG officials or people who are dissidents, and also in condemning what went on in Asmara because it wasn't their version of the issue. I think that's mostly. Maybe there's some more, but
Say anything about the white phosphorus?
I don't. Okay. I don't have any facts to share with you on that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, some more questions. We've still got some time. Gregor, over here.
Thank you, Princeton Lyman Council on Foreign Relations. John, commend your work. But it does seem to me that the situation in Somalia is complicated in two ways. I don't think it's reasonable to expect the Africans to put up a sizable peacekeeping force. I don't think it's money that's holding them back. I think it's a situation, and now the demands on the Africans for Darfur. And as far as the peace process concerns, it seems to me that there is no structure for really reaching out to some of the people who are in Asmara, et cetera, that you want to bring back in. The U.S. is not in a position to really reach them directly. And even the contact group doesn't have that kind of membership. And I just wonder if there isn't the need for a much broader focus with more Middle Eastern countries perhaps involved that can advance this process, because without it, I don't see that the Ethiopians can go home, and I don't think that the situation will become stable.
Okay, I see two more questions, one right front here and another one over here. Let's take this one first, Gregor. This will be the next one.
Hello, Bronwyn Bruton from the National Endowment for Democracy. I run a grants-making program in Somalia and have been incredibly distressed to see the number of partners who have been driven out of the country. Today alone, I'm aware that 20 journalists have had to take refuge in Uganda, fleeing from targeted assassinations and military assaults on media houses, at least one of which has been carried out by the authorities of the transitional federal government. As the United States is attempting to strengthen the institutions of the transitional federal government, I'm curious to know, is there a parallel effort to protect the ability of civil society actors, including non-governmental organizations and the press, to promote the peace-building process?
Okay. And one last question right here.
I think Abdul Qadir Alan Abdullah, I think the hope of the Somalis to overcome this abysmal and difficult situation lies in the reconciliation and dialogue among Somalis mostly. A conference of reconciliation has been taken place in Mogadishu, and it concluded in Saudi Arabia ceremonially. In that juncture, the Saudis offered to the Somalis that they were willing to promote further reconciliation. Up to now, the Arab countries, of which Somalia is a member in the Arab League, were on the margins of the peace process as participation. What does the United States government think of a role of Saudi Arabia in this process?
Okay, thank you very much. John?
Okay. Well, let me start with the Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, since that was the common theme in Princeton Lyman's question and your question. You're quite right that following the end of the National Reconciliation Congress, 200 or so Somali participants in the Congress, plus the President, the Prime Minister, and the Speaker, were invited to Jeddah for a ceremonial signing of the results of the National Reconciliation Congress, and also implicit in that was a condemnation of the what was going on in Asmara. The Saudis have stepped forward with considerable financial assistance, and while they were there, the Somalis requested requested forces from the Arab League countries to come and help support the Amazon. So far, we would welcome seeing additional forces and additional involvement from the Arab League countries. So far, as I know up to this point, none has also stepped forward. There's also, of course, when one talks about international forces, there's also the ongoing process within the United Nations of a possible transition to international peacekeepers. But peacekeepers, as Ambassador Lyman pointed out, from the African continent, have not been sufficient, and of course the Darfur situation is a heavy drain on them, and so we probably are going to have to be looking for other peacekeepers from outside the continent. Question over here about protection of NGOs and the problems of journalists, the attacks sometimes by the government, sometimes by others, but frequently by, at least as a result of government action. I can tell you that there hasn't been one case of a radio station or TV station being shut down, or one case of a journalist being arrested, that we have not been in touch with the Prime Minister or the President. I think that between Ambassador Annenberger and myself, we've written at least 6 to 10 letters on these and other issues from the harassment sometimes of the international humanitarian supplying things, and we interact with the government on every case that comes to our attention that we believe has merit. That's what I'd like to say on that one. And I don't know. There's probably some more in Princeton's question about, but I can't quite remember it all.
I think you started about the process. Peace process.
Yeah, you want to repeat that, Princeton? Help me a little bit.
The question, John, was whether there is any structure there that effectively reaches out to the various elements, including those in Asmara. The U.S. is not in a great position to do it. The contact group isn't even structured to do it. And without that, it's hard to know how one gets a peace process. Just simply inviting them to back down to Mogadishu and Baidoa won't do it. So I wonder if there isn't a need for a different structure for dealing with the peace process.
Well, that's an interesting question. Obviously, I mean, there are perhaps not structure, but there certainly are the attempts, including our own, to reach out to people. I personally met with the former speaker prior to the Asmara conference. Ambassador Randenberger has spoken with at least twice with some of the members of the courts, and the response has been to us has been a non-response, unfortunately. But I'll have to. I mean, I don't have a real answer about the structure. I think what we've been trying to do, as I said before, is to try to strengthen the capacity of the transitional federal government so that the structure that exists, as our colleague here said, the real problem will be not the real problem, but the real issue is if Somalia is dealing with Somalis, and I think that has been the focus of my efforts for the last several months.
Okay, thank you. We can take another set of questions now. Okay, let's see. Nona already had one there. Right here on the side, Alicia. Nope. Right here. And then behind.
My name is Ted Morse. I'm a retired senior foreign service officer, 25 years in Africa, more recently consultant to the UNDP, the World Bank, the British government, the American government on Somalia. I guess my question's about the elections. In one sense, 2009 is a long way off, and the conditions right now certainly do not bode well for that. On the other hand, I'd appreciate your comments as to what role in the negotiations in the future, recognizing what's just happened in terms of the Reconciliation Congress, what role the potential for an election could be used in terms of further reconciliation negotiations with all the parties. Are they willing to fight it out in the election? And if so, the kind of conditions that have to be started now in terms of protection from intimidation, formulation of parties, and all of the rest of things to really fight it out. So appreciate your comment on the role of the elections, even though it's a long way off, but maybe a tool that we have to look at in the present. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum man ittaba al-huda. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Muhammad Ali. I'm with Somalia American Peace Council, and I was part of the people who succeeded with Operation Restore Hope with my life on the line for the U.S. and for Somalia as well. When the ambassador was talking, he talked about the government, and it seems, and he also was expressing, it's the only thing to work with. And I disagree respectfully, because what we really need is to work with every Somalis, including especially those in Asmara. The next thing about Ethiopia, it is no way for Somalis, no way. If you look at the history from Menelik 1891 up to today, they were considering us as enemy. We will never accept that, never. That's the second part. And you can't solve problems of British with German troops. Same with Pakistan problem and Indian troops. And I would like to ask my questions, a couple coming one. Number one is the genocide thing. We're concerned about Darfur, and it's one region. The whole country is being destroyed in Somalia. It was really unacceptable what took place there. Are we investigating? And how many Somali Americans is with your staff, Mr. Ambassador? Because you really need people like me who went there with Operation Restore Hope, some American who have the interest of America as well as the interest of Somalia, not the interest of Ethiopia or any other foreign country. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last question.
Last question is how many Somali Americans are working with your staff? And I think it's important because they know the culture, they are from that region, and we have to accept Somalia is 100% Muslim. We don't mind if the Muslims would like to control themselves and work with Sharia or anything.
I understand the question.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Oh, a new one over here. Yeah. Try to give everybody a chance here.
Hi, I'm Erin Weir with Refugees International. We keep mentioning peacekeeping as a solution, a security solution. And I'm wondering, if we look back to the early 90s, there were almost 37,000 peacekeepers there, including American troops. Why is it we think that 8,000 AU troops can do the job this time? Presuming they can deploy 8,000 troops.
We don't even have the question. Okay, now that's all we'll take for the moment. Sam?
Okay, to answer to take the questions, I think probably in order. The question of elections and 2009, actually 2009 is very close when it comes to trying to organize elections in a situation that's such as there is in Somalia. I can tell you that we had the International Contact Group meeting in Rome on September 10th, which was just after the closing of the National Reconciliation Congress. I earlier indicated that the National Reconciliation Congress was a disappointment in many ways. On the other hand, there was something there, and including the commitment to the completion of the transition within 2009. And the first issue on that is drafting of a constitution and an electoral law, and although a census is on there, I think a census is probably not feasible in that short of time, but some sort of a voter registration. Immediately at Rome, the international community, the contact group, was unanimous, I can say, around the table there, that there was enough for us to all work on with the transitional federal government in implementing those recommendations of the Congress. Both UNDP in the United States and others were ready to provide assistance in constitution drafting. I hope in that, sir, that there would be some Somali legal constitutional experts Somali diasporans who would come back and help as well. We're ready to help on every issue that was decided upon in the Reconciliation Congress. Unfortunately, the crisis, the governmental crisis, has been going on since then. Absolutely, almost nothing has happened, and that's one of the frustrations for all of us who are working on the issue. So we recognize, of course, that 2009 is actually, you use the word a couple of times, a long ways away, but it's not very far away, and that if there's any chance that we will get there, that we have to start, last month instead of next month. On the question that what will help to control the violence in Somalia, we have been working on one premise, on at least one premise, not the only premise, but that is that if people see, the people who are not in the government now, who people see the possibility in 2009 of competing for political power rather than being subjected to a group that was chosen in Kenya in 2004, that this would be enough incentive for them to help stop the violence. The violence is the security situation is nearly a third of the questions today have been about the security situation. The security situation, especially in Mogadishu, continues to be bad. We're working with the UN, the British, ourselves, and others have been training policemen, but we've trained about 4,000, I think, so far. The transitional federal government, the transitional federal government's army or militias or whatever they are really very poorly trained and very poorly and undisciplined. I won't say poorly disciplined, undisciplined. In fact, I go back to the question of Ethiopian presence, and one of the reasons that people say to me that they don't want the Ethiopians to leave until there's something to fill the vacuum is because the transitional federal government troops are so poorly disciplined. The question about how many Somali Americans are on my staff, I can tell you precisely one, and I'm working on having one more. I have 2 Somali Kenyans on my staff, but also you should know that when I started in the 1st of January this year, there was precisely one American on my staff. So right now we're up to five Americans, and one of whom is a Somali American, and two Kenyan Somalis on the staff. I'd be happy to have 5 more Somali Americans on my staff if I had them available. And I've been involved in crises and post-crisis conflict resolution in Africa for a lot of different countries, and I can tell you that the places where I've seen that it has worked, the situation has really worked, is when the diasporans come back and help. Unfortunately, although everybody I meet in the Somali Parliament has either a Dutch or a Swedish or an American or a Canadian passport, most of the diasporans aren't coming back to help, and I would welcome more in every regard.
The troop level question.
Troop level question, which was how do I think that 8,000 rather than I think the real issue there is not that peace can be imposed by outside people, in the sense it can be maintained if there is a modicum of peace. It can be maintained, as the Ugandans have shown that it can be done. But the main thing about on the peace process will not be an imposed security network, but it will be that people want to have the security and work for it themselves through the process.
Okay.
The genocide question.
Genocide question. Genocide I worked for 2 years in Darfur, and I know how controversial the designation of genocide is. I do not know in Somalia that there is any concerted effort to wipe out, somebody said the whole Somali nation, by another outfit, another power. I suppose you mean the Ethiopians. I do not believe it exists.
Okay, thank you. Another set of questions. We got another one in the back here, and over here, Gregor.
I'm back. My name is Omar Abukar. Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to make a comment and a question, and this will be my last question. I won't bother anymore. First, I comment about the comment of Mr. Abdul Qadir that he is saying peace, reconciliation in Mogadishu. That was a bogus peace. You know, and we know as a Somali people. No one can negotiate under occupation. Ethiopian troops are in Mogadishu. Our land is under occupation. No opposition group, as the gentleman said, can come in Mogadishu and sit with Ethiopians. Anyone who is proposing, he's not really genuine, he's not really want a genuine peace. To be on the road of peace, Mr. Ambassador, you must go to Asmara. This is my advice to you. Sit the real opposition people.
Okay, we've heard this view.
Yes, thank you.
You're repeating yourself now.
Okay.
Have a question. Have it quickly.
I'm sorry. Forgive me, please. My question to you is that, Mr. Ambassador, are you proud? Do you feel you have done a successful job in Somalia as an envoy? How do you grade yourself today? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we had a question over here.
Thank you, sir. Joseph Kuhl. I had 2 questions. The first was about the fighting in the north between Somaliland and Puntland regarding U.S., Ethiopian, and transitional federal government policy toward that. It seems like the news has reported casualties and this city being taken and that city being taken, but no government reaction. And, I'd like to hand the microphone over here.
Okay.
We had a deal, so sorry. My name is Abdul Rashid Ali with the Somali Family Services based in Minnesota. I don't have no question or no comments, but I would like to ask you if you could express your feeling within 3 words in Somalia. if you could describe your feeling in 3 words, what would be those 3 words?
Well, questions get more and more interesting. And you guys got to stop making deals. Okay, John.
My turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
Okay, fine. Okay. Let me do something that we haven't. I'm going to talk about something we haven't talked about so far today. Somaliland, Puntland confrontation that's been going on for the last 2 or so weeks. This time, it happens almost every year about this time. It's been going on, I think, since 1991, fighting over the Sul and other areas. This time, I think you're right. It seems to be more serious than it has been in recent manifestations of it. It's hard to get precise information about what's going on. The Puntlanders' version is not necessarily the same as the Somalilanders' version, and neither one is the same as perhaps as the Mogadishu version. I can tell you that I personally have been in touch with the Somaliland authorities more than the Puntland authorities, but with the president and foreign minister and others. In fact, they will tell me that until 72 hours ago, at least, that Somaliland regular forces were not involved; that it was primarily clan militias. And then they will also tell me that I think maybe it was last Sunday night there was a provocation, and then that's when they moved toward Lasano. I mean, both sides claim it's purely defensive. Both sides claim that and certainly I think they agree on this, that it began as an inter-clan conflict. I don't know that we have made a public statement other than our concern about it, but I can tell you that we have been doing everything we can, both ourselves and to a lesser extent with the Ethiopians, to try to make sure that that it doesn't get worse. I don't know how many people have actually been, how much actual conflict, how much actual combat there's been. But certainly there have been people killed and people captured and paraded and things like that. And it is a worrying situation. Worrying situation for all wars, big or small, are worrying situations. But in Somalia, where you had 2 areas that were relatively well administered, unlike a lot of the country that had progress in elections in Somaliland and other things like that. These are, even though the ultimate resolution of where Somaliland would be if we're successful in the other parts of southern Somalia, that's an issue to be decided in the future. But there's no one that I know of that wants to see that what has been established there to break down. And certainly the Somaliland, both sides need to take some responsibility for it. But I think that what they really need to do is the traditional Somaliland resolution mechanism, which is to listen to the elders that have tried to help them get through this. But it hasn't worked very well so far. Although I think maybe Noel knows, has there been any fighting in the last 2 days? Noel, is it? No. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. No.
I can give you a brief.
Huh?
I can give you a little bit.
You want a hazardous self-assessment of U.S. efforts?
A hazardous self-assessment. Well, I can tell you that
doesn't have to be personal.
If you get an A for effort, then we could deserve an A. If you get an A for results, we still have a long ways to go to get our best grade. But I think that the main thing that I would say on that issue is that the hopeful issue, and the reason I came back, honestly, is that we are engaged. I said before, we are engaged, and we're going to stay engaged. And we haven't always been disengaged in trying to work through the Somalia issue. And so I think that I'm delighted that we are engaged. And if I had to have three words to describe what I'm thinking about Somalia, I mean, I wouldn't be here if there wasn't some hope. I wouldn't, but I can tell you that concern and dismay with the lack of peace in the country are also part of those 3 words.
So those 3 words were concern, dismay, and hope.
Do I have to live with that now for the rest of my time?
You don't.
Okay.
I said it, you didn't. So you can deny it. Okay, next set of questions. I recognized one here, Alicia. And then we'll come here, and the gentleman. Well, let's go with some new blood. Oops, yeah, I saw a hand that went down. Okay.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your comments. My name is Laura Turner. I'm with the United Nations World Food Program, and I'm sorry I was late, but I was following up on our staff member. My question is very direct. What do you see the prospects of humanitarian space being in Somalia? You know that we've had to stop our distributions in numerous places throughout the country. And what do you think your office can do to assist a renewed respect for the neutrality of humanitarian actors?
Okay, very good. Thank you. Then right behind you, Alicia. This lady. No, right there, right there.
Thank you. My name is Sofia Tesfamariam, and I'm with the U.S. Foundation for the Horn of Africa. And I had the opportunity to attend a conference in Lund, Sweden, where Professor Sumater and a variety of Somali intellectuals and professionals were also present. Majority of them had plans to go to Asmara for the conference in Asmara, and they did not seem like extremists or any of the other labels that have been put on them since the conference. And they're continuing to work and dialogue in Asmara, and I've had contact with Dr. Zakaria, who is the spokesperson for the group, and he's very encouraged by what's going on with their dialogue. And what would it take for the United States to support this dialogue amongst intellectuals, ordinary housewives that I met, and a variety of a cross-section of the Somali population, who 450 of them have gathered in Asmara to participate in this conference? What would it take for the U.S. to participate and support this equally important dialogue as the ones that have been carried out, as the one in Khartoum was being carried out, as the one we had in Dubai, and the one that you talked about in Saudi Arabia?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I saw one other hand. Okay, they've lost their place. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Steve McDonald. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. I really appreciate it from my heart, and Mr. Yates and giving us the opportunity. I want to also mention it that UN voted, United Nations voted, I can get you the list, they voted the neighboring country, specifically Ethiopia, not to participate in Somalia. I would appreciate if you look at that. And also not to be part of the solution or the problem in Somalia. We had 5 wars with Ethiopia, Mr. Yates. Everybody mentioned it. United Nations voted. I don't know why the U.S. overruled. I think we have to beg every United States to say, please, this is coming from you, please give us opportunity to be our own. They invaded in Somalia, Ethiopia. I have the UN resolution not to be the neighboring. So how could they be a part of the solution and be a peacekeeper in Somalia when the UN voted against
we hear your concern. This
Thank
point
you.
has been made.
Thank
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. We could take one more question before we break for John to answer. Okay, I see a hand right here. Wait for the microphone.
My name is Abdullah Said Osman. I'm currently a diplomat in residence at George Mason University and a former ambassador to the United Nations. Just wanted to focus attention on the issue of prioritization. We have now quite a lot of talk and a lot of highlights that's been made in regard to the pacification and the reestablishment of peace in Somalia. But at the same time, I think there are also others who are talking about the roadmap, institution building, and other economic and social recovery programs and so on. While, for example, all these are important issues, I would rather would have thought that greater attention would be placed on the issue of peace and security, because unless you have an environment of peace and security, you cannot have any development. You cannot talk about recovery programs. You cannot talk about humanitarian assistance and support. In this particular regard, I thought that the international contact group would have played a more proactive role on these issues. Can I maybe have some reaction from Ambassador Yates on this issue? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Those questions are related to the first one on humanitarian assistance. So.
Okay. With regard to the delivery of humanitarian assistance in Somalia, I mean, you're right. We've had, in the course of the year, we've had many obstacles. There were many obstacles in the course of the last year and the year before that, and the year before that too. But some of the obstacles this year have been put in place by the transitional federal government, trying to establish their own controls, which were formerly, in many cases, handled by undisciplined militias or warlords or people profiteering from the delivery of food. But the point is that the food was delivered beforehand. I'm talking especially about food in this case, and that when the government intervened, sometimes inappropriately, that it in fact created problems on it. I can tell you that with the European Commission and other international donors, Ambassador Rannenberger and myself have both intervened with President Yusuf and Prime Minister Getty on each specific issue. We've also, this time, primarily Ambassador Rannenberger, when the Kenyans had closed the border for the crossing of food aid trucks into Somalia from Kenya, he, I should say in this case, intervened with the Kenyan authorities at the highest level. But in the end, as the new special representative of the Secretary General, Amadou Ould Abdullah, said the other day in his press conference in Nairobi, we're never going to solve all the problems of all the humanitarian problems in Somalia without a political solution. There's just no way. I mean, we've been doing a good job, they, for 17 years of delivering food, of keeping people alive, but it seems that the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate in some aspects. For example, this year with the flooding in the Shabelle Valley, if there had been a government over the last 10 years, the dikes and other things might have been repaired. So, in the end, it's not just the delivery. I mean, assuring the delivery of humanitarian assistance, of whichever kind it might be, but it's having the framework where it won't be a problem to deliver humanitarian assistance, and that's really what it has to be. Not the very short-term goal, because we still have to continue to do that, and it's important work, but we're not going to get it solved until we have a political solution. What would it take to support the Asmara process? All I can say is that what I've said before a few times on this, that the people, first of all, the people who did go to Asmara were invited to come to Mogadishu. They're still invited to come to Mogadishu. If they don't want to come to Mogadishu, they can come to Djibouti. But also, they have rejected participation. I contest the assertion that this is equally important to what went on in Mogadishu at the National Reconciliation Congress. What went on in Asmara was an important manifestation of opposition to what was going on in Somalia by a certain group or groups of people, including, as you said, a number of people from the diaspora. What went on in Mogadishu was a flawed, in some respects, National Reconciliation Congress of 2,600 people that in fact took place for 45 days. Whether or not they were all representative of the groups that they should have been representative of, whether or not they did as much, quote, reconciliation as we would have liked. It's true, it didn't happen as well as it could have happened. But there were important things that did occur. And in fact, one of the amazing things to me was that in 45 days of meetings in Mogadishu, which is a security it's very severe security situation. They didn't get interrupted once in those 45 days by security issues. We will continue to reach out. We and others will continue to reach out to the people in the Asmara group to the extent that they want to be reached to. If you're suggesting that there's going to be some sort of marrying of the two processes as equal efforts, I think it's not realistic. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, and I read everything that comes out of Asmara, both statements and documents, the primary function of the Asmara Congress has been the sole issue of quote, liberation of Somalia from Ethiopia. We have someone back here who's 4 times has come back to me and said that the Ethiopians, as long as the Ethiopians are in Somalia, that there's no chance of any peace and reconciliation. He's not alone in believing that, I suppose. There's 450, did you say, in Asmara? I'm not trying to be cute on that. All I'm saying is that there are, as I also said, there are an awful lot of people, and several in this room today, who've also acknowledged that they would be less comfortable with the Ethiopians gone and nobody filling the vacuum than they are with them there. Ethiopia. Yep. Okay.
I think the last question
had to do with the International Contact Group, and why didn't the international community has attempted, for at least for the year of 2007 that I've been involved in, has attempted to be very proactive within Somalia on issues from political reconciliation to helping to define the roadmap to 2009, to trying to help improve the security situation. And I think that even though all the record may not be what we would have wanted it to be, in fact, there is a very active participation and effort on all these issues. I mentioned earlier on about being in Rome on September 10th when we adopted the last contact group communique, and you don't necessarily make all that much progress in international diplomacy by adopting communiques. But in any case, this was all of the principal actors international actors in Somalia, from the United Nations, the European Union, the United States, Britain, Italy, African Union, League of Arab States. We all were on the same page on September 10th about the necessity to go ahead and support the process that was going on in Mogadishu. And I also mentioned to you our frustration in being unable to make the progress that we want to and need to make since September 10th because of the ongoing political crisis this time in Somalia. And as so many people at this table today have mentioned, the security situation is also a hindrance.
Okay, thank you, John. We scheduled to go to 3:30. I think we've made John work awfully hard this afternoon. I would, because I'm going to close it, and I didn't give you a warning that I'm going to close it, I'll take one more set of questions, and then we'll go. Okay? Okay. Anybody here we've got some who haven't asked a question yet.
Some new questions.
New questions. Do not have a question in Ethiopia.
Thank you.
It's on.
Earlier in your statement, Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned that much of the violence in Mogadishu is being emanated from the remnants of the Islamic courts. They are being supported by Eritrea. And the State Department talk about holding Eritrea accountable. Would you talk about that in terms of their support for the violence in Somalia?
Okay, thank you. And the last question here.
Mr. Yates, it's a well-known fact that poverty drives conflict and civil war. It's also a well-known fact that environmental problems contribute to civil war.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans or efforts in this regard?
In regard to addressing
solving
environmental
problems related to poverty and environmental degradation, as well as maybe education, as we know that uneducated young people are also a threat to global security. So do you have any plans?
And you didn't identify yourself, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Obviously, I'm a Somali. My name is Abdul Razak.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the question on Eritrea hasn't come up quite this specifically before, and I told you beforehand that although my colleagues from the rest of Horn Africa weren't able to make it today, and I wasn't going to be speaking too much about the rest of the Horn. I think that it is absolutely undeniable that the government of Eritrea has been taking its conflict with Ethiopia and fighting it in part in Somalia. I think it's absolutely clear that there is evidence, sufficient evidence, to show that they have been arming dissident elements for creating terrorist or other kinds of acts within Somalia. And I think that Assistant Secretary Fraser was very clear on the issue of the degree of complicity by the Eritrean authorities in what's going on in Somalia. Finally, with regard to the questions of poverty and environment, on environmental issues, on civil war, first thing I'd like to do is to salute the many NGOs and international aid donors who are braving the conditions there to help out in Somalia, from work creation projects to some education projects. Fortunately, I mean, UNICEF and others have continued their efforts. CARE, I mean, I can't tell you how many NGOs have continued to fight these poverty issues in Somalia. I'm also happy to say that the United States has directly supported. In the last month, we signed a $3.3 million agreement with UNICEF to deal primarily with education, rehabilitation of schools in Mogadishu and other issues. On the environment, I also mentioned earlier on that the environmental degradation from flooding to other things have exacerbated the situation in Somalia. There are efforts of all kinds to help repair the infrastructure. But I'm afraid that the environment will continue to suffer until the situation has a real political solution. I mean, people are cutting down trees that shouldn't be cut down, causing all the classical effects of flooding and deleterious effects of deforestation. So you're right to identify these as two crucial areas, and there are. I also would say that there are a lot of people and a lot of international support that's going in to try to help with them, but they're really, in a lot of ways, they're just really band-aids, because until there's a political solution, you're not going to have an overall solution. And I thank you very much. I knew it was going to be a long afternoon, and I would get some good questions. I think that the main thing for me is that we continue to have these kinds of exchanges. And also, it's important for me to hear from a wide range of people from in the Washington and other communities who are interested in Somalia. I think it's a battle worth a process that's worth continuing. And as I said before, we, on the official United States government, is going to be involved as long